or getting ready to play in the tournament, and I meet Coach Mazzoni for the first time. The guys are kind of giving me a hard time because Coach was one of those guys who would just look you in the eye and tell you straight how it was and shake your hand and, son, this is how it is. And
Today on the show, retired Memphis State handball four-time All-American Chris Jennings is up next. Welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the stories of retired athletes, the perseverance, the resilience, the career pivots, and finding the passion they crave. So grab your iced tea or your coffee, because I'm from the South. Get ready to be motivated and inspired, because this is where the real stories are told. Back in 1986, Memphis State University, now the University of Memphis, went on an incredible run with 8 consecutive national titles in the sport of handball, all led by famed coach Charlie Mazzoni. Today's episode with Chris Jennings is actually from my archives. I talked with Chris back in the early days of the pandemic from his home in Canada. Chris is a retired professional handball player and so much a part of the Memphis State handball legacy. He's a 4-time U.S. Handball Association Collegiate All-American, among a list of other awards. Chris and I chat about his childhood growing up in Toronto, his young days as an athlete, the lure of Memphis State, his days as a linesman for the Central Hockey League, and why he moved back up to Canada. We also reminisce about the glory days of Memphis State handball, and there were many, and that little and somewhat unknown Memphis State hockey team. Yes, I did indeed say Memphis State hockey team. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Chris. But back in the late 80s, early 90s, Memphis State had a long run in several sports. Racquetball was one of those. The pom-pom squad was one of those. But handball was also one of those. You guys had an impressive 8 consecutive national championships beginning in 1986, led by the famed coach Charlie Mazzoni. So let's really, for those out there, because as I was telling you, I didn't even know what racquetball or handball was. And we're going to talk mostly about handball today. But I didn't really know what handball was when I came to Memphis State. And for those out there, I mean, I know the word handball, obviously you're playing with a ball with your hand and stuff, but why don't you just kind of explain maybe a little bit what the sport is and how it got started, if you kind of know any of that?
Well, handball is the oldest game played with a ball. It was basically, played. There's early records of Roman or
Yes.
Egyptians playing,
Right.
with a ball against a wall. And the game, has evolved around the world in different areas. But the modern game of handball that we play really started in Ireland. And
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Ireland has something called the Gaelic Athletic Association, the
Yes.
GAA, and their 3 major sports are Gaelic football, hurley, and handball are the 3 sports that make up the GAA.
Oh,
And the game was really brought about in the counties of Ireland through the church. And the church, the priests, when they came over to North America, they brought the game of handball with them. And, courts were set up, around parishes and things of that nature. But the game, kind of picked up in areas like places like New York City and Chicago and LA. Even here where I'm from in Toronto, it picked up in the YMCA's and the
right.
YMH.
Right.
But it was really brought over by the priests, and I was lucky where I grew up. There was a Catholic seminary called St. Augustine's, and I actually went to high school right next to the seminary, and there was 5 outdoor courts that are reminiscent of what they call the old alleys that were in Ireland. They're concrete structures. They're
Right.
outdoor. There are 3 walls. And that's how the game really came here. And then later on, they brought the game indoors and they added a 4th wall. And that's what we play. And that's the type of courts that we had in Memphis were 4-wall indoor handball courts.
Right.
And that's
Right.
really the modern game. And speaking of racquetball, evolved from handball because, somebody said, oh, this hurts my hand, I'm going to put a racket to it. And that's really how racquetball, because it was a little bit easier on your hands. The handball is quite hard, and if you haven't toughened up your hands, it hurts.
Do you play with a glove or do you play just barehanded?
So we play with a glove. It's a thin leather, usually a deerskin leather glove. And really the glove isn't so much to protect your hands as much it is to keep the ball dry. So when the ball
Oh,
gets wet, it doesn't take a true bounce and it can skip because it's slick. So
okay.
that's one of the reasons why we wear gloves, because it keeps the ball dry. So
S-
it makes it a little bit, and it helps protect a little bit as I've gotten older, the ball hurts now.
So I forgot to mention that you're actually a Canadian,
That's true.
and did you say you were in Toronto?
I live just outside Toronto. I live
Okay.
about 40
Okay.
minutes east of Toronto, but I grew up, in the suburbs of Toronto, and played my handball in Toronto, and spent a lot of time right in the city. So
So, let's dive more into, so you grew up there in the Toronto area. And when I was reading kind of your bio, which you were very thorough, and I thank you for that, um, you played a lot of sports growing up, a tremendous amount. So what were some of those sports that you played?
well, naturally, as a Canadian, I played hockey. You know, that was kind of my first real love, watching guys on ice and
Right.
skating around and hitting and shooting pucks. That was my thing. But I was fortunate. The place I grew up to play handball, I played. My dad actually worked at what is now the JCC. What back in the day it was the YMHA, the Young Men's Hebrew Association. It
Oh,
was a big handball club. But I learned to play basketball there. It was another big love of mine growing up. I played high school basketball. And then in high school, I also transitioned to play rugby. And we had a great rugby team. I
right.
played baseball. I played soccer. I was kind of an all-around
You
athlete
were.
when it
You
comes to
were.
all those different sports. So, and handball helped me a lot with that, because the hand-eye coordination, the footwork that you gain in that sport really helps you in all your other sports. So that was a big help for me.
So, how did you transition? Because you ended up going to college at Memphis State, and I believe you were recruited. And I know that you had said there were some Canadians that had come right before you. But what was the big thing about Memphis State being the mecca of handball right then? And why did you choose to come there?
Well, so I was the sixth Canadian to attend Memphis State and play handball there. In total, there were 8 Canadians, so there was two
Okay.
more after myself. And handball is a small community, and you know, I had played at a pretty high level in junior and played at the U.S. Junior Nationals and competed, really well, top four, in North America in my age groups. And a lot of the college coaches, though, back then, they didn't really go to the Junior Nationals and kind of watch the players. It was kind of odd. So the Memphis connection was really all through the players. So the first Canadian to attend Memphis State was a guy named Robert Larhoven, who was from Montreal.
Okay.
And Robert had met one of the players, a guy named Rod Pagello, who was from New York. And they had met at a tournament, and Rod had spoken to Robert about, you should come check out Memphis State. We've got a great handball program there, and Coach Mazzoni. And Robert had family connections in Atlanta. So Robert, he came to Memphis State, and he was one of the top players around at the time. And then he went back to Montreal, and he recruited another gentleman by the name of Sean Massey.
Okay.
And Sean was the second Canadian. And then Sean met a gentleman by the name of Mark Polgravia. I don't know if Mark would have been
No.
there at your time as well. And so Mark is from the Ontario area. He's from St. Catharines, Ontario, near Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And I'd known Mark as a junior, and so he was the third one. And then he kind of let there's two players, Jeff Cottom and Rob Pierce.
Those are the names I know.
Those
Yes.
those are the guys you know. And so Rob and Jeff came at the same time. And I stayed in touch with Rob quite a bit as a junior, and we played in tournaments. And I had played Rob at a Canadian Nationals when he was attending Memphis State, and I beat him. I just got to throw that in there for him. And
Because we do plan on interviewing Rob as well.
yeah, and Rob's a great friend, and but we always root each other, when we can. So Rob had stayed in touch with me, and he had said, you should come check out Memphis State. And there was a few other schools that had programs, but I now had that connection with Rob and Jeff and Mark and those
Sure.
guys. And every October, Memphis State hosted their open handball tournament. So Rob convinced me to come down, and I'm still in my last year of high school, and in Ontario you have 5 years of high school, not four.
Oh
So
my God.
I was in that my fifth years, and I'm playing in the tournament or getting ready to play in the tournament, and I meet Coach Mazzoni for the first time.
Right.
And the guys are kind of giving me a hard time because Coach was one of those guys who would just look you in the eye and tell you straight how it was and shake your hand and, son, this is how it is. And he's giving me a tour of the campus, and I'm enjoying it. And we get back, and he's kind of saying, you should think about some other schools as well. Texas A&M has a good program. Lake Forest College in Illinois has got a good program. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Like, he doesn't want me to come here? I'm not sure. Now, coach had never seen me play.
Right.
He'd never seen really all of us play until we got there. And so I was playing in the Memphis State tournament. I was playing a guy who was from the University of Illinois, a guy named Todd Headland. And Todd had beat one of the top Memphis players the previous year at Collegiate Nationals. So
Okay.
here I am, a high school player, and I get Todd in the first round, and I beat him. And Coach Mazzoni comes to me after the game. He goes, "I want to see you in my office, son." And I'm like, "What did I do wrong?" Right? Shut that door behind you, son. In his office, I'm a little nervous. He wasn't a tall guy, but he was intimidating.
Right.
He looks at me straight in the eye and he says, "Son, forget what I told you yesterday. I want you to come to Memphis State." And that was it. That's all it took. And he was really, our father away from home.
Right.
Many of us had traveled, from all over Canada and the United States. So, yeah, that was it. So, I made arrangements, and I wanted to be a Tiger. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
we were very happy for you to be a Tiger. I think you came there. I graduated in 90, so I think you came
yeah.
there.
So I got there in 90. I
Yeah.
showed up in January of 1990.
Yeah, I was gone. No,
Yeah.
I graduated in December of 90. Okay. So, and there was something that I kind of didn't realize. I was looking at I was doing some research, and handball and racquetball are not considered sports so much like football and basketball. They're called like club sports. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So football, basketball, baseball, they're all under the umbrella of the NCAA.
Right.
Right? Where other sports at Memphis, like cheerleading, pom pom, racquetball, rugby,
Right.
handball, even hockey, they were all considered club sports. Now, what's the difference? Well, they were not sanctioned by the NCAA, so
Which
um,
could be good.
which could be good. And so, like for guys like racquetball and handball players, there were pro tours that were happening. So
Right.
we could play in pro tournaments, and we could earn money if we could at those tournaments, and not hurt our eligibility whatsoever. So our sport was sanctioned by the United States Handball Association. Was they would run the collegiate tournaments, and they
Okay.
would set up the rules how the tournaments run. So that's who we played under. So that was
Okay.
really the difference.
And I think, because I'm a huge basketball fan, and there's been so much speculation and spotlight on how the NCAA just kind of does all kinds of crazy things that, I don't see that as a bad thing that it's run by, an association as opposed to, and I do think that, I didn't plan for us to get into this topic, but I do think that athletes have a right to earn money. They're out there earning money for the university, and although, it's hard for a basketball player to go out or a football player to go out on a pro tour. They can't really do that like you guys could. Um, let's the one thing that I noticed was, after probably the mid 90s, Memphis State didn't really show up anymore as national champions. What do you can you tell, or do you know anything about what the decline of that was? Like, what happened to that?
So really what happened was with Coach Mazzoni after, I want to say, the 94-95 season. um, he decided to step down. He'd done
Right.
it long enough. He was still, on staff and faculty at the university. He passed away just over a year ago,
Okay.
and he battled cancer. It was a huge loss for all of us. And yeah, he had kind of had his time with the
Right.
with coaching the team. Rob Pierce was a grad student, and he tried to kind of take over, but there was some politics that he wasn't, faculty.
Right.
So he really, they didn't allow him to coach. And so really the program just kind of faded away, unfortunately, without that leadership. And Rob was focused on his career, and
Sure.
eventually moved to Chattanooga, and there wasn't really anybody left to take over the reins from Coach Mazzoni. So the program just kind of faded out. And
Right.
racquetball, Coach Lyles and the racquetball team continued to do what they were doing, but there was nobody really there to step in to replace Coach Mazzoni.
Right.
And that's what happened to the program. It just kind of faded away. It's
So,
sad.
it is sad because, there was a great tradition there, and I just, it's kind of sad, but that kind of transitions now. In reading some of the research talking about just the decline in handball over like the society, they talked about how the speed of the balls now make it harder for older people to play it, and it's more hurtful to them. And so that's a little bit of the decline in just, society changes and trends change and things get more popular. Like when I was little, we didn't have anything to do with soccer, and now every elementary school is playing soccer. So things, I guess, go through trends and as technology and stuff changes as well.
Well, they do. And one of the biggest problems and things that hurt the sport of handball and racquetball, they kind of go hand in hand,
Right.
was that a racquetball and a handball court are the same size. They're 20 feet by 40 feet
Right.
length and width. And that's a big space for a facility to take up.
Sure.
And if you're only putting 2 to 4 people in that space, the cost per square foot for a facility doesn't make a lot of sense. You could take that space and you could throw 20 cyclists or
Sure.
spin class people or
Yeah.
an aerobics class or whatever it is, and recoup your money. So a lot of the clubs that had courts were now transitioning and trying to make more money with that square
Right.
footage. So courts were declining, we're losing them. They weren't building them in new facilities. And we always had a hard time recruiting new players. Junior programs in the United States, there's pockets of them.
Right.
And those pockets, are led by people that are passionate about the game, but attracting new players. There isn't a TV audience. We're
Sure.
not
Yeah.
selling shoes. There isn't a product. We're not really on TV. And that's really the thing. Today soccer's on television more. My kids
Right.
play soccer.
Right.
That game has really grown, and it's a simple game. You just need a ball, a pair of shoes, and off you go. Handball's no different. It's just a ball and a wall
Right.
that you need. But the having the people that teach the game is
Sure.
dwindling, and that's hard. It's always been a challenge.
Yeah.
um, for myself, I probably would never have played this game if it wasn't for my dad who played, and he worked
Right.
at the facility where they played. Now you take guys like Rob Pearson, Jeff Cottom, they learned to play the game in middle school. They had a teacher at their middle school by the name of Brian Gatto, and he introduced all these kids to the game at their school. And there were hundreds and hundreds of kids that were
Wow.
playing at that time. And it just happened to be the same time that I was a junior. So
Right.
the there was a big influx of players in Burlington, Ontario,
Right.
a place you probably never heard of, but they have a
Actually,
lot of great
have
handball players.
kind of. I have kind of.
And but that was really because of one guy got these kids
Yeah.
to play. And that's always been the struggle, is to recruit young players to this game. It's always been a challenge.
I will say I've played racquetball. I've never played handball. I did take a racquetball class, and only because I knew like the racquetball team. So I took a class, and I was partnered with one of the Memphis State football players who was terrified of playing with me. He didn't want to get hit by the ball. But yeah, that was kind of funny. But I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a little bit more than tennis for me, because you could go in there and you didn't necessarily need somebody else. I mean, you needed to have another person in there, but you could actually do it by yourself.
Yeah,
Whereas tennis, you can't really. You have to have a little machine. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Um, so let's talk about how did you. So after you graduated, you stayed in the Memphis area, correct?
I did. Yeah.
Why? Why did you choose to stay in the Memphis area?
Well, I don't know really, but you know, I fluked into some stuff, and one of the things that, of all the things that, of all the places to come back to play hockey, was in Memphis. And
Right.
while I was playing handball at Memphis State, I got approached by a guy. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Billy Garaffa, and Billy
I
went to
have, I
Chris.
think.
Billy
Yeah.
went to Christian Brothers. His brother Dave played football for Memphis State.
Okay.
So Billy and Dave in 1992, the Central Hockey League had started back up, and the Memphis River
Yes.
Kings were coming to town.
Yes.
And so I'm at handball practice, and I'm walking out of the courts to go get a drink of water in the hallway in the Hyper building. And Billy knew me. We taught swimming lessons on South Campus, and Billy's a redheaded Italian from New Jersey, that went to high school in Memphis. That his family moved to Memphis. So he sees me in the hallway. He's like, "Hey Jennings, hey, you play hockey? You're from Canada?" I go, "Yeah, Billy. I played hockey. I don't play right now." He goes, "Well, we're starting a hockey team." I'm like, "What are you talking about, Billy?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, we're going to start a Memphis State hockey team. You want to play?" And I'm like, "I got no equipment. I got nothing." But one of my teammates, the younger brother of Jeff Cottam, Donnie Cottam,
Okay.
um, we were like, "Hey, Donnie, you want to play hockey?" And Donnie's like, "Yeah." So Donnie drives back to Ontario and gets us hockey gear.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, it's like a 15-hour drive home for him. And he goes and he gets us gear, and we start practicing playing hockey at the Mid South Coliseum at midnight,
Okay,
right?
that's
And Billy,
funny.
Billy has got ice time for us, and we start playing. I'm like, I didn't even know anybody played hockey in Memphis, but I guess they played at the Mall of Memphis. Remember that ice
Yes,
rink, the Mall
yes,
of Memphis?
yes, yes.
So they played there, and so he got some players, and he knew some guys, and next thing you know, we've got a club hockey team, and he's like, "Okay, we got a bus. We're going to Dallas." And I'm like, "What?" So Billy and Dave have got a bus, and we're going to play SMU in Dallas, and some other town. I want to say maybe Kansas State or somebody like that.
Right.
So we all pile in this bus, and we drive to Dallas and go play the first ever hockey games in for Memphis State.
Okay,
And
that's funny.
it was very funny, and hard to believe,
Did
but that got me back into playing hockey.
so did y'all win the game?
We actually weren't that bad. I can't recall if we won that weekend or not. We might have won one of two, but it was a start. And Billy had got, he would get other teams to come in and play us, or we would go on the road, and we played at schools like Kentucky, and I think we played University of Illinois, Carbondale or something like that,
Right.
and played UT Knoxville, and he would find games for us, and we would play these games, and we would play after River King games, so it would
And
be
I went
midnight.
to River King games. I don't remember Memphis State having a
Yeah,
team.
so it started was 92 because
Okay.
that's when the River Kings came back.
Right.
So after playing hockey for about a year or two, I got approached by a gentleman who said, "Hey, we've got a youth hockey program here and we need some help." And I said, "Okay, well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, we need coaches and we need referees." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me what we need." And he says, "Well, if you're going to coach, you'll volunteer your time and help out, with our teams. And if you referee, you get paid." I said, "Whoa, stop right there. I get paid?" Okay. So again, my roommate Donnie, I said, "Okay, we're gonna be referees." He's like, "What are you talking about?" So we're
And
gonna go get.
were you still a student at Memphis State?
Yeah, at that point I was still a
Yeah.
student.
Okay.
So Donnie and I signed up with USA Hockey, and we went to the referee clinic and we got certified. Well, Donnie and I were probably the two best skaters out of all the referees. So we learned how to referee and we worked all the time. And so the youth would play on Saturdays and Sunday at the Mid-South Coliseum, and Donnie and I would go and ref 10 games a day. And
Wow.
that kind of continued. So from there, um, the Central Hockey League, the way they work, they would hire referees that would travel around, through their league.
Sure.
And but the linesmen who worked the games, they were local guys. So a local guy um, approached me and said, "Hey, if I get you a tryout to go to the Central Hockey League officials camp, would you come with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." So we go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm going to my first pro hockey officials camp, and I'm nervous, and it's like September, and there was no ice in Memphis to really, other than the mall to skate at. So
Right.
I was kind of out of skating shape, and I was like, "Oh, what's going to happen here?" And I get there, and again, I was a strong skater, so I did really well, and I was like, "Okay." So they approached me and they said, and at the time, I've got a beard now, but back then I was wearing a goatee.
Okay.
And hockey officials, they don't like you wearing, facial hair. So I got approached by the director of officiating. He says, "Hey, if we offer you a position, would you shave your goatee off?" I said, "My goatee will be off just after I hang up the phone." So, anyways, they offered me a position, and I became a linesman in the Central Hockey League, and shaved off my goatee. And I had opening night at Mid South Coliseum. There's like 10,000 people, at the
Yeah.
Coliseum, cheer on the River Kings. And I
Yes.
was a little nervous, and standing out there, the national anthem's playing, and I'm like, "What am I doing out here?" And anyways, that turned into a life of officiating for me, and I've been refereeing hockey for 27 years now,
Wow.
and
That's pretty
that was
impressive.
that was my start. And it was a lot of fun. And back then, that league, there was a lot of fights, so I spent
Yeah.
most of my nights breaking up fights and um, you know keeping control, and it was a lot of fun. I loved it, I enjoyed it, and yeah, it was something that I never thought. Tell people the story that I got back into hockey in Memphis, Tennessee.
I
They're
know.
shocked.
I loved going to
But
those games. I had never grown up, obviously, watching hockey of any kind, and I really loved going to the River Kings games. So, what then lured you back to Canada? Because you eventually went back to Canada.
yeah, I went back to Canada. I didn't have much going on. There wasn't. I seen a lot of people in it. In the late '90s. Memphis really wasn't a happening place. I saw a lot of
It's
people
true.
leaving. I didn't really have much going on, other than my officiating thing, but it wasn't really something that was going to keep me there. Most of the Canadian guys, they met girls from the South and, got married, and that was kind of their thing. A
Right.
couple of guys that happened to. So I decided, I was going to go back home and I'm going to, see my family. I hadn't seen them in a few years because I hadn't been back that much. and start over. And I moved back, and I met my wife the first week I was home. Just
So,
out of fluke
can I ask how you met her? I always love those
at a
stories.
bar.
So, I have another friend of mine who actually is a friend of Donnie's, Steve Cooper. You probably don't know him.
No, I don't know Steve.
He was older. He was in the Navy, but he took a leave of absence. Well, he'd come off tour overseas, and he had a weekend, and he went to Canada, and he met his wife at a bar in Canada as well. But I always love those stories of how people meet.
Yeah,
Um,
it was kind of weird because I think I was wearing cowboy boots. I think that was it. I was you know, like, who's this dude with the cowboy boots on?
so, do y'all not wear cowboy boots in Canada?
Well, they do, but not really around the Toronto area. If you go out west, Calgary,
Okay,
and places like that, you're gonna find a lot of cowboys. And
okay.
oh, hey, that was another thing. I don't know if you ever knew this, but did you know Memphis State had a rodeo team?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, there was one guy, and he used to come to the parties at the handball house, and he had his red cowboy
Okay.
boots, and he was the Memphis State rodeo team back in I forgot about that guy.
Can I
So
just say that because we're all old now? The handball house in Memphis was very well known.
yeah, there
The
was
handball parties were very well known.
well, you remember, right, that Memphis State was, and probably still is, a dry campus, right?
It is, it is.
There was no pubs on campus. Like you go to university here in Toronto, there's pubs
That's
on
right.
campus, and pub parties and stuff like that. And fraternities, right? The
Yeah,
fraternity rows were not like, we
yeah,
would go to tournaments at LSU, and we would see the frat houses at LSU and go, holy moly, these are
yeah, totally
incredible.
different. Yes.
And the Memphis, Greek culture wasn't as big as it is at some other campuses. So, the handball house, we were kind of like an unofficial fraternity, right?
And I
And
still remember where it was. I
yeah,
never went to any parties because honestly, they scared me just a little bit. They were a little too they were a little too wild for me.
yeah. And there used to be parties at Donnie Young's house. The first time I ever went to a
Yes.
party at Memphis was at Donnie Young's house. And
Yes.
I'll never forget my roommate Ken Crespi, who's from Detroit, Michigan, Livonia, Michigan, and Detroit. Kenny's got me under his wing, and he says, "Don't drink the punch." I'm like, "What? No, don't drink the punch. Just stick with the beer. You'll be fine." I'm like, "All right." So we're there, and we're kind of the last people there. Goes, "Okay, now we drink the punch." I go, "Drink the punch." I said, "You said don't drink it." No, now we drink it. I'm like, "Okay." I couldn't get my head off the pillow the next day from that stuff. I don't know what Donnie and those boys put in that stuff, but it definitely did a number on me.
Um, uh, okay. I just want to make this PG podcast today. Um,
We'll leave it at
but
that.
and Ken Crespi, I was an RA in the dorm. Yeah. Ken and Donnie and those famous scavenger hunts.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Um anyway, okay, so you're back in Canada,
right,
drying out. Drying out from all the fun.
exactly.
Um you continue to do the refereeing and like how did you transition your life? You started over, you met your wife, and then kind of what did you go into?
So, yeah, it was I moved back, and yeah, I didn't have a job. So the first thing I did was I went to a hockey rink, and I said, "Hey, you looking for any referees?" And you know, they're always looking for somebody to ref. So this it was a men's league, and they said, "Yeah, yeah, we'll
Right.
take you on." And next thing you know, I'm skating all the time, and it was something that filled the void until I got back into it. And I had worked some retail background when I was in Memphis, and
Right.
through my hockey connections. And so I went and I started in the retail game here, and was a manager at a few different places, mainly sporting goods. That was kind of the connection.
Right.
And then I transitioned into some sales, and you know, kind of that's where I led down this road of sales management and retail. I started my own children's clothing and consignment store,
Oh, that's
based
pretty
on,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was neat. It was a lot of fun. It was something that I'd wanted to do. And whenever you start your own business, it's a little bit of a risk, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
my family was young. We had two young kids, and we started out and we gave it a shot. And then I kind of lucked into what was probably one of the coolest jobs I think I've ever had. And a friend of my brother's was working at what was then called the Air Canada Center. So the Air Canada Center was where the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Raptors
Yep.
played. It was downtown Toronto, and it was a 19,000 seat stadium. And they said, we're looking for a guy to help us do our overnight conversions, and that was changing the building from hockey to basketball and concerts. And
Right.
so I went and checked it out, and I said, "Yeah, I can do this." And so they had me shadow a guy for about a month, and then they let me loose and let me, I would have a team of 25 guys. And you got to remember, the Air Canada Center is probably the third busiest arena in North America, behind the Staples Center and Madison Square Garden.
Wow, yeah.
So we're talking about a facility. So my first month there, we had 26 events in 28 days of February.
Oh my god.
So we only had 3 days off. If it wasn't for the Spice Girls having back-to-back shows, we wouldn't have had that third day off. But that's how busy that place was, right? And it was constantly go, go, go. And the show must go on and you can't miss. And yeah, it was an exciting play. I got to see lots of great concerts,
Yeah.
games, basketball games. I could go anywhere in the building, and it was an exciting place to work. And yeah, I enjoyed it. And then we had NBA and NHL had some work stoppages
Yep.
and labor disputes. And I was at a point where I was like, wow, what's going to happen to my job? So I transitioned back to working in retail, a major wireless carrier in this company, or in this country, a company called TELUS, whose head office was right next door to the Air Canada Center. So I started working for them. And now I'm a project manager for a company that does retail renovations. So we work for companies like Walmart and Home Depot.
Right.
And so that experience of the arena environment and the fast
Sure.
pace of changing things over and understanding what retailers need has really transitioned well for me in my career right now. And I'm with a great company. And we're lucky during this COVID time to still be working because of
Sure.
companies like Walmart haven't stopped.
Right.
So we haven't stopped, and which has been great for us. So I'm happy to still be working right now. So
So do your kids, you have 2 sons, they're in their teens,
that's
right?
right. They're 15 and 14.
Bless your heart.
Yeah,
Bless
yeah.
your
And
heart.
my 15-year-old's now 6'2". He's had a growth spurt during COVID, so
Oh
he's
my
taller than me
god.
right now. The younger guy, he's catching up. He's not too far behind. So
Wow. So
yeah.
did I'm assuming they both play sports?
Yeah, they both took to soccer. So, being Canadian, I said, well, my boys will play hockey, but they didn't love it. I don't know what it
Right.
was, but they they fell in love with soccer, and they both have played competitive rep level soccer for the town that we live in, and our town has a great soccer program, probably one of the best in Ontario alone. And then my younger son played for a former Canadian national player and professional player, a guy named Dwayne Rosario, and he played at his academy for 3 years, and now he's back playing for our town again. So, and it's been hard this year, right? COVID has
Sure,
really
yeah.
messed everything up. The poor kids haven't had to, any games. Everything's been canceled. But
Right.
in August they got to train again. So they love basketball too. We've got a basketball net in the driveway, and they're out there
Right.
playing all the time. So And my younger guy loved baseball too, so he's played some house league baseball and likes that as
Right.
well.
So how is I always like to ask about how COVID has kind of affected the family. Are they at home for school, or are they back in school?
So when COVID first started, right, everything they
Yeah,
came
back in
home.
March. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was tough for my younger guy who was in the eighth grade, and
Yeah.
they missed out on graduation and all that stuff.
Which we didn't have when I was growing up. We had one graduation and that
Yeah,
was high
high
school.
school. Yeah, I'm the same way. We
Yeah.
but now right, you graduate from kindergarten
Yeah.
today.
And pre-K.
In pre-K, yeah. So now they're both in the same high school. We decided they would go to school,
Sure.
but it's odd. So right now, so today's Monday,
Yes.
and they go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They start at 10 a.m. and they go to 12:30, and then they
Okay.
come home. And then at
Wow.
2 o'clock, they go on a Zoom class. So they
Okay.
only have two classes, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays they have a 2 o'clock Zoom call. So they don't have to be at school until 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And
It's very
they're not meeting for every single class then.
um no. Well,
Okay.
sometimes it's a Zoom and then sometimes it's in
Okay.
class. But right now they only take two classes, and then so they've got probably another week or two, and then they have two more classes. And then so really this
Oh,
year it's a quadmester. Normally in a semester you would have four classes. Now
sure.
you have two
Got
classes
it. Got
and
it.
four semesters. So they've
That
spread it out a little bit.
that is an interesting. I have a lot of friends who are teachers or work in the school systems in various locations, and so it's been interesting seeing how certain schools are doing things. The larger schools versus the really smaller schools, and that's a new one too. I had not heard, but I kind of like that because then you're focusing on just two subjects for a short amount of time, and I would think that they would probably be able to learn more than having to focus on 4 classes at one time.
Yeah, I talked to one of the teachers and even they're struggling with it a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Especially the
sure.
Zoom class. And they have a hard time kind of getting to know the student because they really don't. So it's a definite challenge this year, and we'll see, how it's going to. As a parent, you had the option to send your child, or
Sure.
they could stay home and just do virtual learning. And again, I don't think they were ever prepared to do virtual learning like the
No.
universities were. So this is a challenge.
And not, the other thing that cuz I teach online as well, but I teach for a nonprofit, and prior to March, we did all in-person classes. And then when COVID hit, we immediately pushed to go online, but not all of our instructors are comfortable. And I think that's the case with a lot of people. Not everyone's comfortable teaching on a computer system.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and the struggle for us, we teach adults, and the struggle for us was, how do you get that connection? And you can get it if the people engage back, but it is hard, especially for children, and the younger you get, it has to be hard, because even in high school, because that's what my master's was in, was high school history or government. Even in high school, you've got teenagers that don't want to engage even in class. And
Right.
so how do you get them to engage on a computer system, or
Yeah.
do anything? So it's got to be incredibly difficult for all those. So a couple of more questions. So do you stay in touch with all of your handball teammates?
Yeah, Facebook has been great, right? We've been
Yes.
able to stay connected through Facebook, and most of the guys are on there. So
Right.
um, this summer when COVID hit, I kind of started getting guys to get some calls, and we would
Right.
do a house party or Zoom, and we would have some calls, and I also set one up for the hockey guys too, right? So I have my hockey Memphis State hockey guys
Oh,
as
that's
well. So
cool.
I've done both of those this summer. So I was kind of the guy that started getting that going, and we got most of the guys out, like Ken Crespi and Kevin
Right.
Hill and
Kevin Hill, I remember too.
yeah,
Yeah.
Kevin Fitzgerald was another guy. He's been out, but Mark Paul Grabia, Rob Pierce, we haven't been able to get Jeff Cottom to come on yet.
Why not?
Um, I don't know, he's a busy guy. Um, but we've had guys like Dave McGrath, Bear Myring, who Bear's name from Donnie.
I've yet to
Um,
meet him. I have
yeah,
yet to meet
Bear's
him, but
yeah,
I've heard
great
about
guy.
him like since college.
Yeah, and there's so we have stayed in touch, and a lot of us, we still play handball. Most of us do, anyways. So we'll meet up at tournaments. Maybe play together. A big tournament that we used to go to a lot was in Toledo, Ohio, every Labor Day weekend,
Right.
and we've all kind of gone there. Some of the guys gone to the World, so um, it was Matt Heiber and Kevin Hill played in the, I want to say, the 45 plus division of the Worlds in Minnesota a couple of years ago, and they won. And Jeff Cottom came back. He had kind of really stopped playing after college, and
Right.
him and Rob teamed up again, and they played in the Worlds. And a lot of us, that's kind of where we'll meet. We'll meet at a tournament, and
Yeah.
we're all kind of spread out all back over. There's guys in Atlanta and Knoxville and Chattanooga and Chicago and Indiana. We're all kind of spread out, but we'll get together, and we've had reunions back in Memphis. Especially when Coach was still alive, and
Right.
we would do that. And now we're talking that we may meet up at Donnie's place in Mexico, um, and have a reunion in Mexico when we can all travel safely, right? So that's been put on the table, which I think most of the guys will be up for, because the game of handball, when you get older, it's tough on the body, and
Yeah.
most of us, we've paid our dues, and our bodies are like, okay, that's enough of this.
And
So
there's nothing better than sitting on the beach with a cold drink in your hand and
that's
just
right.
bonding with your friends. So you also said that in our pre-interviews that you took up cooking while during COVID.
Yeah, I did. I always liked to cook, and I think I love to barbecue too, right? I think that came
I
from
think that's
Memphis for
most
sure,
yeah.
right?
And
And
it's a
I
man thing too, I think.
yeah, it's a bit of a man thing, that's for sure. But you know, when I experienced, like Corky's and rendezvous ribs for the first time, and a Three Little Pigs pulled pork sandwich on Highland,
Oh my
and
god,
right,
yes.
and those were, you know. Rob Pierce, introduced me to, you got to have a barbecue sandwich. I'm like, what are you talking? What's that? Because we'd never heard of a barbecue sandwich up here in
With
Canada.
slaw, you do like the
With,
slaw on it.
oh yeah,
Oh
you gotta
yeah,
have the
yeah, yeah.
slaw. Yeah, I'm
Gotta
a
have
I'm a I'm a barbecue snob now, right? So, um, yeah, and so COVID gave me more time because I wasn't, at a soccer field every night
right.
with my kids, and I really kind of, started to make some interesting things. So if you haven't, I'll send you a link to my Instagram page
Oh,
where I
no, I
kind of,
do follow you. I do
yeah.
follow you on
Okay. So
Instagram,
you've
yes.
seen all my food posts, and
Yes.
I'm trying different things, and I watch some, celebrity chefs, and see what they're making, and see if I can do that, or just try something new. But it's been really good. I love it. I like to eat, so you
I like
know,
to eat too.
and yeah, I'm learning new techniques. I made my own flour tortillas this year, which I never thought I'd try.
Oh,
I
wow.
made Indian naan bread, which are kind of like tortillas, but a couple of ingredients are different. So they were pretty simple to make.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I tried some stuff like through handball. We had a teammate that was from San Diego, a guy named Dave McGrath. So we went out to San Diego to play in a tournament one year, and I got introduced to like carne asada,
Yeah.
and so I looked up how to make carne asada, and it was pretty simple, and oh my god, it was so good, and I hadn't had it in forever, you know and Toronto has really, Toronto's a real multicultural city, so we have a little bit of everything. So
Right.
the barbecue world is now here. So there's a lot of barbecue places that were never around before. I got a place I can walk to just around the corner that does the great Memphis style ribs,
Oh my God.
and then and there's all these things happening, and a lot more Mexican. You could never get Mexican food here other than Taco Bell, but now there's authentic Mexican
Yeah.
places that are popping up. So um there's a little bit of everything now, and that was never here before.
I will say I just moved back from to here from to Tennessee from Houston, and I got to tell you, I mean, Houston has great seafood and has great Mexican food, and um, but I miss Memphis food. Like I miss the barbecue.
And it's
I
different, right? that
it,
that
it is,
Memphis
and
barbecue and Texas barbecue are different.
oh my god, when I first moved there, they talked about brisket and I had no idea what brisket was, and then they're telling me, "Well, it's like the butt of a cow," and I'm like, "You don't barbecue cow. Like, you only barbecue pig." That's not real barbecue. But
That's right.
yeah, I mean, I really miss and I miss the Memphis food, but it's also, I think, the culture with the food. I think
That's right.
that for me is just, it's it's just such a big difference. Have you brought your wife and kids back to Memphis at all?
I have not. No. Well, we've
Been
we've
busy, I
tried.
guess.
I definitely want to make that trip. Now, granted, I did take my boys on a road trip. We did Nashville and Chattanooga. Um, just me and the boys. We had a little bit more vacation time,
Right,
and in the summer, so we went and saw some of my friends, my hockey buddies that now
right.
live in Nashville, and then we went and met and stayed with Rob Pierce in Chattanooga. So
That's a
they
really nice drive for them. I mean, that really is a really pretty drive
Y-
down.
Yeah, it is. It was a great time, and they were great on the drive, and they were a little bit younger. I was probably 5 years ago when we did it.
Right.
So they enjoyed it. They had a great time. We saw some amazing things and tried some great food, and Chattanooga is a great outdoor city, and
It
you know
is. It is.
there's a downtown there was a great rock climbing facility that was attached to a parking garage. So they had this rock climbing wall on the outside of the building,
Oh, that's a
and
great idea, though.
yeah, it was fantastic. And my younger guy Shane, and he loved it, and I'm taking these pictures. He looks like Spider-Man going up the side of a building, right? So they had a lot of fun. So they've been down there. My wife, we went down to when we'd been married a year, and I won a long drive contest at a golf thing, and the prize for winning was a trip to Biloxi, Mississippi, 5 rounds of golf. And so we flew down there, and we also went to Hattiesburg too. There was
Yes.
I don't know why they had us in Hattiesburg, but
I don't either.
it was night and day from Biloxi. Um, but we went to New Orleans and we had dinner at Emeril Lagasse's restaurant,
Right.
and we did the French Quarter thing, and some Pat O'Brien Hurricanes, or maybe just one,
Maybe
and
just one, yeah.
yeah, and so just got a little bit of taste of the South. So, but yeah, we want to get back. I was back. Oh, I can't remember how many years ago. Not too many years ago. We had a
Right.
reunion, and I went back, and you know, the city has changed a lot.
It really has. It
That
really
downtown
has.
core on Beale Street had changed quite a bit, and there's other
Yeah.
neighborhoods. And for a while, I lived in Midtown, and that area has changed a lot. And the casinos. Remember, we were there when the first days of those casinos, right? When
The
there was
Tunica,
one
yeah.
boat
Yeah.
in
That was
Tunica,
a
and a ten
big
dollar
thing.
cover charge at that first place. But yeah, it's all changed in downtown, and the baseball diamond is great. AutoZone Park, and we
Yes.
got FedEx Forum Arena right downtown now. So I had a lot of fun. And Memphis was always a fun place to nightlife wise. It
It
was always
was. I remember because I moved there in 1986. So Bill Street was just getting started. The Civil Rights Museum did not even exist. It was a grown up. Lorraine Motel had a fence around it and completely grown up. And, I just remember like all of those places, and so I kind of grew up in Memphis as Memphis kind of grew up. But yeah,
Right.
I've kept up because I lived in Houston for 16 years, so I've kind of kept up, and I've been back occasionally. But it's just really blown up the past few years. And they just released this huge plan for the riverfront to
Yeah.
make this
Saw that.
huge park, and it's just amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited. Well, when you and your wife and kids come back, Christy and I will give you the best experience ever.
Christy wants me to come back because I did get to see her last time I was there, and she's like, "You got to come back." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I
Yes.
still got a lot of friends in Memphis, right? And
Yeah.
from my handball, my hockey, and there's just so many good people. And
Yeah.
that was the one thing that really appealed. That we were fortunate as a handball team to have such really good people around us,
Right.
and support our program. And unfortunately, we've lost a few of those gentlemen now.
Yeah.
They've joined Charlie to handball courts in heaven, and
Yeah.
they were great guys. And interesting characters.
Yeah.
We had a dentist named Doc Weiner who'd played basketball at UT Knoxville and get drafted into the NBA. We had another guy. We called him the general. He was an ex-Air Force general, and he would take us flying. And he
Oh
would
my
call up the
God.
handball house, and he was like, "Hey, who wants to go to Dyersburg today?" And I'm taking a plane up, and we would go. And Jeff Cottom, because of that flying, is now a pilot. That
Really?
that bug that the General Portis put into him at the time. After he graduated, he went on to flight school. And there was those connections. There were so many good people, and the people in Memphis and the staff at the university were so nice to all of us. And that was such an appeal, that family feel that we all had. and,
Yeah.
and I think it was just that southern touch, right? A little bit of accent. There's a lot that we all fall for, right? And
Well,
you know
exactly.
it
Exactly.
was great.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chris Jennings. As we wrap up this episode, thank you all for listening, especially if you've made it all the way to this part of the show. I so appreciate all of your support. And what would be like a cherry on top of the milkshake if you could take 60 seconds and give the show a review on whatever platform that you listen and or watch. It helps the show get found, and I love to read all your notes. My mantra: like, share, and review. Until next time, remember, change is our ally, and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week.